Schönen Nachmittag, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren. Ich weiß nicht, wie es Ihnen geht, aber wenn Sie hören, die Julia Redder reden von ein paar internationalen Anbietern von Filtern, dann bekomme ich ehrlich gesagt die Gänsehaut. Da wird man wirklich ganz schier, wie der Wiener sagt. Bei uns wird es heute gehen, weniger um das Leistungsschutzrecht, sondern vielmehr um dieses Spannungsfeld, das Präsident Kappa am Beginn bereits angesprochen hat, um dieses große Spannungsfeld, in dem sich das Thema Internet und Zensur bewegt. Nämlich einerseits der Staat und andererseits privat. Das ist ja ohnehin eine große Diskussion, seit Jahren muss man sagen, auch in der ganzen politischen Bewegung, in der wir drinnen stecken, mit diesen neoliberalen Zügen etc. Es geht also um die Frage, wie viel Staat möchten wir bei der Regulierung des Netzes haben und wie viel möchten wir auch von teils unangenehmen Aufgaben delegieren an Private. Und wenn wir von Private reden, dann reden wir natürlich nicht mehr von irgendwie einen mittelständischen Betrieben, wie wir das so in Österreich kennen, sondern dann reden wir von globalen Konzernen, die manchmal schon Staatsmacht fast haben. Es geht auch darum, wie viel Kontrolle braucht das Ganze, wenn der Staat jetzt sehr wohl eingreift ins Netz. Ja. Es geht auch ohne richterliche Kontrolle. Aral Balkan hat England erwähnt, wozu das führt, mit 20.000 gesperrten Webseiten, ist auch nicht sehr beruhigend. Dann ist auch die Frage sehr präsent für mich, ist in der Packung drin, was auf der Packung draufsteht? Also wenn man sagt, es dienen Maßnahmen jetzt dem Schutz vor Kinderpornografie, kann man nachfragen, ist das wirklich immer so effektiv? Führt das tatsächlich dazu, dass man kinderpornografische Webseiten blockiert oder eben nur blockiert und nicht vom Netz nimmt etc.? Es könnte auch sein, dass sich hinter diesen Maßnahmen dann auch sowas wie Zensur à la Biedermeier verbirgt. Und auch das wurde ja angesprochen mit dem Beispiel Russland, die natürlich ihren Schutz des Staates dazu benutzen, um unliebsame Regimekritiker im Netz mundtot zu machen. Klingt jetzt alles ein bisschen paranoid, aber Sie wissen ja, Ihnen geht es vielleicht auch so, Sie sind ja fast alle hier aus der IT-Szene, alle Menschen, die sich mit Technologieentwicklung beschäftigen, haben ja so einen Zug, leicht paranoid zu werden. Ja. Ich muss Ihnen jetzt was zeigen, das passt nämlich auch zum Thema Paranoia. Das ist am Beginn verteilt worden, Sie haben das alle bekommen. Dieses Teil da. Männer vor allem, das ist ja die Mehrheit wie üblich bei der IT, neigen ja dazu, dass sie Gebrauchsanleitungen nicht lesen. Ja? Jetzt gehe ich einmal davon aus, dass 80% der Männer hier wahrscheinlich nicht gelesen haben, wozu das Ding gut sein könnte. Ich habe die Gebrauchsanleitung auch nicht gelesen, aber es wird nach der Pause vom Generalsekretär Maximilian Schubert eine Erklärung geben, wozu Sie das bekommen haben. Das ist ein sehr gutes Teil. Ich verrate nur so viel, es heißt im Jargon USB-Kondom. Mein Name ist Franz Zeller, ich bin in Österreich 1, meistens sage ich jetzt dazu, für die Sendungen Digital Leben und Matrix verantwortlich. Momentan nicht, weil auf Sabbatical. Momentan ist die Julia Gingl, die da hinten sitzt, dafür verantwortlich. Aber ich bin im Oktober zurück, ja. Und werde dann wieder für Unruhe sorgen, ganz einfach, ja. Wie das so ist. Ich darf Sie heute durch den Nachmittag begleiten, einen Nachmittag mit 2 Keynotes und 2 Panels. Den Beginn macht ein Gast aus England, Aral Balkan. Er nennt sich selber Cyber Rights Activist und setzt sich für mehr Gerechtigkeit im digitalen Zeitalter ein, unter anderem bei einem Social Enterprise, das Indie heißt. Ganz oben auf seiner Agenda steht, und das hat fast einen programmatischen Titel, steht ein europäischer Gegenentwurf zum Überwachungskapitalismus des Silicon Valley. Ein Gegenentwurf, der sich durch dezentrale Organisation auszeichnet und eben ein Internet of People schaffen möchte und nicht ein Internet of Things and Surveillance. Let's welcome Aral Balkan. Aral, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Is this working? Okay, great. It's lovely to be here. I don't know how I'm going to follow the USB condom, but I'm going to try. In my talk, I know that you're here from mainly an industry of internet service providers. But in my talk, what I want to talk about is the greater picture of where we are on the internet today and some of the systemic issues that might let you make more sense of why you're seeing some of the things that don't make sense to you, like these filtering rules that are coming in and the content blocking, etc., that you're faced with, and whether or not we can fix these problems at the level that we're at today or whether we need to go somewhere else. But first of all, the reason I'm here. I'm standing talking to you today because when I was 7 years old, my dad brought home one of these computers. It was one of the first personal computers. And with it, he gave me a manual for a programming language called BASIC. And he said, here, take it, play with it, you can't break it. So I did. I both played with it, and I broke it eventually. But what was amazing about this was that I could write a few lines of code, and I could create some stars. I could write a few more lines of code, and I could create a spaceship. And with a few more, I could actually fly the spaceship that I had created in a universe that I had created when I was 7 years old. If you can do that, that's quite magical. That tells you that you can do anything. But there was one thing that this computer did not do. It did not watch everything that I was doing. It did not track me. It didn't store that information forever. It didn't constantly analyze all of this behavioral insight that it was gaining about me with the express purpose of manipulating and exploiting that intimate insight into my life for its profit and political motives. It didn't do any of this. In fact, if I had installed an application that did any of that, if it looked at what I was doing, maybe sent that information to a server somewhere, then we knew what to call it. We called it spyware. We called it malware. And we knew that it was bad. Today, we would call it the business model of the next potential billion-dollar Silicon Valley unicorn. So we've come a long way, right? And there's a reason for that. Because back then was the last time that we had decentralized technologies that we owned and controlled. This was the personal computing era. It was not the first era of technology. Before that, we had mainframe computers. This was a little before my time. These computers filled up entire rooms. They were very expensive. They could only be afforded by universities and large corporations, and the people who worked at them would rent time on them. They were somebody else's computers, not ours. And we had no rights because of that. The organization or university had all of the rights to see what we were doing, etc. It was their property. And then we went back to the future with the web. Because we like to think of the web as decentralized, but it could be nothing, nothing could be further from the truth. With the web, we always had a client and server architecture. We had clients, just like on the mainframes, we had these dumb terminals, we have clients that connect to servers. We thought it was decentralized because at the beginning, there were a lot of servers and they were owned by a lot of people. But then we took this system, which was actually created based on taxes, based on a government and a military scheme, and we put it into an enzymatic pool of venture capital and capitalism that incentivized those centers, those servers, to scale vertically and to grow. And as they grew, they coalesced. Think about how many companies Google or Facebook buys every week, right? They coalesced, and the centers grew. These servers grew, and they became the new mainframes. But this time, not limited to the confines of one organization or a university, but at the global scale. So the web era is a centralized era. It is the mainframe 2.0 era, and that's what we're living in today. That has its problems, because they're again somebody else's computers, and we have no rights. But what really interests me is the next swing of this pendulum, because it's like a pendulum. So what does the decentralized world, what does a decentralized world in the internet age look like? What does an internet of people or an IndyNet look like? That's what I'm working on. Because today, all of our technologies, whether they're your smart television, your smart watch that you wear, the smart car that you drive or will drive you to places, the smart teddy bear that your children play with, the smart pill that you swallow that actually broadcasts information from inside of you somewhere, they all work the same way, by gathering data, information about you. And that is not the issue, right? That is a fact of life. This is how modern technology works. The real question is who owns and controls this data, this insight, these technologies. If we can answer that question with we do as individuals, then there's no problem. We have a democracy. If the answer is a handful of corporations do, and that by extension this information is made available to governments also, then we have a very different type of system. Then we have a corporatocracy, an autocracy, a feudal system. And this is not a question that we need to answer today because we answered this 2 decades ago. Today, we do live in a world where all of our technologies, data, insight are controlled by a handful of corporations. We live in a corporatocracy. We're not sleepwalking into some sort of dystopian future. We are there. This is a system that Shoshana Zuboff from Harvard Business School calls surveillance capitalism. In the movie The Matrix, people live in a virtual space while their bodies are farmed biologically in a tangible space. We, on the other hand, live in the Matrix inverted, where we live in a tangible space where we are increasingly being farmed from virtual space. And the people doing the farming, it's not a coincidence. Like, let's take Mark Zuckerberg, for example. When he says privacy is dead, remember he's talking about your privacy, not his. Because when Mark buys a house, he buys the 4 houses around his house to protect his privacy, right? When Mark uses a computer, he knows that he should tape up his microphone and his camera because he cares about his privacy. The same Mark, though, has 60 people working right now on how to read your mind, literally read your mind. He has people working on putting devices inside your home with cameras and microphones that can recognize your face and can recognize what you're saying and are always listening to you. So remember that when he says privacy is dead, it's just yours that he's talking about. And that's because Mark is special. Mark is a very special man. And he is very special even beyond that. He is one of 5 very special men in the world who among themselves have as much wealth as half of the world's poorest population combined. So these 5 men, there are no women in the statistics, sorry, that's how systemic inequality works in patriarchy. These 5 men have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people, the poorest 3.5 billion in the world. This is a statistic from Oxfam, a charity that studies poverty in the UK. So let's say you're one of these really, really lucky 5 men, and they're not a random 5. Remember, surveillance capitalism, 2 aspects. There's surveillance, and then there's capitalism, right? What is the business model that brought these men here? Who are these men? There's Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Ellison, and Michael Bloomberg. Do you see anything common about the businesses that they're in? It's very interesting. So what if you're one of these 5 men? Well, I think you should probably build some walls around yourself, right? Thick walls, tall walls, just because you have a lot of stuff. And there are a lot of people out there who don't have much, so they might want some of your stuff, so protect yourself. And I think it would be a good idea if you kept an eye on these people, right, on everyone else, because they might not be up to any good. So you might want to know that. Now, you can do this in tangible space, or you can also do it from virtual space. And in fact, oddly enough, here's where the surveillance and the capitalism come together again, because this is the exact business model of the businesses of these 5 men, right? Facebook's business model works by having 2 audiences. Its users and its customers. Now, its users are the people who don't pay Facebook. Its customers are the organizations that do. And how Facebook works is it tracks everything that its users are doing, watches, stores forever, analyzes continuously all of this data, this information, to create profiles. Now, these aren't pieces of paper in a manila envelope somewhere like the Stasi did, right? They were amateurs. These are living, breathing simulations, right? And this is what it then rents access to or rents pieces of to its actual customers, right? So this happens in server farms, and if you ever ask yourself what's being farmed, it's you. You are what we are farming. This is our business model. The business model of Silicon Valley is people farming. It's farming people. These companies, Facebook, Google, etc., are factory farms for human beings. They don't want your bodies, don't worry, not the biological stuff. We used to do that. Now we think it's rude to own people's bodies. We don't do that anymore. That was called slavery. That's in the past. Today, our business model is to own everything else about you that makes you who you are, right? To own and control that. That's our business model. So we don't need your biological body. So what does it mean, for example, when Facebook improves its products? We all get excited, right? Hey, Google's releasing something new. When these companies improve their products, it's like the massages that we give to Kobe beef. It's not for the benefit of the cow. It's to make the cow a better product. And in this analogy, you are the cow, in case that didn't come across. And this is not an error. This is not a bug. This is not a mistake. You keep hearing, oh, Facebook made another mistake, and they apologize. And no, this is systemic. This is their business model. When Facebook was a startup, Mark Zuckerberg needed money. Who does he go to for money in the Silicon Valley model? He goes to a venture capitalist. And he says to the venture capitalist, hey, venture capitalist, I'm a people farmer. I use this business model, the one that you invest in. And I think I'm going to be very successful, and in 5 years' time, I'm going to have this network where 200 million, 300 million people are giving us all of their information. How much money will you give me today for when we sell that business in 5 years' time? You have to understand this. Venture capitalists don't invest in the business, a sustainable long-term. They invest in the sale of the business. We call it the exit. That's when they get their money back plus a profit, right? So the venture capitalist says, oh, Mark, you look like a smart kid. Here's 5 million for when we sell the company if you're successful. If you're not successful, I've also given 9 others 5 million. I know I'm going to lose 9 of those. That's why the one that succeeds has to be a billion-dollar unicorn, right? This is the system. It's systemic. And this is a system that has given us a world where one company, Google, can track you across 70 to 80% of the web. The 70% statistic is from Princeton. The 80% statistic is from my own web crawls. What does that mean? You go from one site to another, and Google can track you through this. A web where the worst site that I could find had 172 trackers on it, tracking scripts. You go to one site, and 172 other organizations, other companies are watching what you're doing, right? Are notified about your reading that page. That's crazy. And this means that, for example, that site, every time it loads 2.58 megabytes of tracking code alone. We actually calculated this. There was an Observer article about it. We calculated this because I was like, what does that mean, right? So I thought, okay, I know how much 1 gigabyte of data costs in the US for mobile phone users. I'm not American, I have this accent, but I'm not American. But I know that Americans pay a lot for their mobile browsing. 1 gigabyte costs a lot. They brag on their website to their customers, not to their users. They say, oh, we're very popular, we get millions of people, this percentage from America, etc. Long story short, this one site we calculated costs just mobile phone users in America $4 million a month just to load the trackers because of the data costs. That's just one tiny cost, right? One tiny little cost. But that's the kind of world it's given us. It's given us a world of fake news. Julia, I believe, was talking about that. I didn't understand her German, but I understood fake news. Why do we have fake news? Well, we have fake news because we no longer have a free press. Because our free press has been replaced with the behavioral advertising industry. Ad tech, as we call it. And don't listen to me about this. Listen to the biggest publisher in Europe, Axel Springer. Their lawyer recently said this at a court case. The core business of Axel Springer, the biggest publisher in Europe, is to deliver ads to its visitors. Journalistic content is just a vehicle to get the visitors to view the ads. We've created a world where journalism is bait. And then you wonder why we have fake news? Because we're following the eyeballs no matter where they go. It's given us a world where Facebook has patented a camera that can watch you without your knowledge to tell you, to show you things based on on the emotions that it thinks that you're having at that time. Are you sad? Watch this. Are you happy? Watch this. A world where Google can follow your behavior all the way to the store when you make a credit card purchase. A world where we are tracked when we walk in cities through the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth in our phones. A world where when you're looking at a menu at a pizza restaurant in Oslo called, Pepe's Pizza? When it crashed, people realized that the menu was also looking at them and figuring out, oh, it's a male, young, attention time, is he smiling, wearing glasses, right? The menu was looking back, that's the camera on it, and analyzing you. A world where the CTOs of some cities are so clueless that they just gave all of the real-time license plate information of all of their citizens to Google because Google said, if you do that, we'll tell you when there's free car park spaces in town. So they just said, okay, Google, here, track all of our citizens' cars in real time. Isn't that great? In the city I live in Malmö, we have a city bike scheme. It's great. You can ride around the city with your bike. I loved it. There's so many places that they have these bikes. It's so great until you read the terms and you realize that it's being run by Clear Channel. Yes, that's Clear Channel, the global conglomerate advertising agency company. But there are no ads on the bikes. So why are they putting all this money into it? Remember, it's all over the place. They can track where you're going. They're getting hyper-local information about where you are, adding that to your profile. It's given us a world where in Italy, the Italian government, in exchange for $150 million, sold all of the medical records of its 61 million citizens to IBM. All of the records, everything. Look, this stuff, really, when we're talking about it, we're not talking about anything deeply philosophical. Like, if we want to avoid this sort of bullshit, we just need kinderground rules and kinderground kind of philosophy, really. It's no more complicated than never accept candy from strangers, right? If I need to spell it out for you, never accept candy from Silicon Valley, if, for example, you're a city or a government. Now, some of you are laughing now, which is good, because we come to ISPs. All right. And you're like, damn it, almost free. Now, one of the things that I've noticed recently with ISPs, now, I'm sure this doesn't apply to any of you in the room, right? Internet service providers. But I've seen some nasty internet service providers, not like you people, right? Who want to do exactly the same things with user information that Google and Facebook do. Who go and lobby and say, hey, Facebook and Google can monetize all of this data, can monetize the metadata. We have all of this data that, we know all the browsing histories of people, etc. We want to make money from this as well. Now, of course, none of you people, right? But there's some people out there who do that. So this is bad, right? You don't want to be like Google and Facebook, right? No, you want to be better than them. The way I see it, you are the librarians of our era, right? You're not the bookstores, you're the librarians. You have a responsibility to nurture and safeguard the information, the communication, our ability to have the discourses that we need in democracy. You are the ones who provide access to democracy, to debate, to ideas, right? You want to be the opposite of Facebook and Google, really. But some people apparently don't. But thankfully, the European Parliament just pushed back on this and said, no, you shouldn't be able to do that. Because the whole thing was, hey, we're an internet service provider, And if we ask for consent, then we should be able to, monetize, make money from the browsing history of our users, right? Users is a bad word, too. Only two industries use the word users, right? Drug dealers and Silicon Valley. So let's talk about people, if we're talking about people. So if we have consent, but what does consent mean if it has repercussions? If I say to my ISP, I don't want you to sell my browsing history or to make money from it, I don't want you to know about it, so I'm going to say no when you ask me. And you say, okay, that's perfectly fine, Aral, thank you. You just won't be accessing the internet through us. I'm sorry, but that's not consent. That's extortion. They're two different concepts, right? So that's what also the European Parliament just said, which is very good. So, because remember, really, you don't want this information. You don't want this data. Because any information and data that you have, or Google has, or Facebook has, is also going to go to the government. This might be a government that you think is benign. I'm not sure if they exist. Or it might be a government that you know is very much not benign. So this is all about surveillance capitalism. And if you need one photograph to summarize surveillance capitalism, it's this one. In this photograph, you have the heads of the largest technology companies in the world, who among themselves have more information about more people than anyone has ever had in the history of mankind, sitting at the same table as then President-elect Donald Trump. If this picture doesn't scare the shit out of you, I don't know what will, because it sure does to me. So that's the problem. That's surveillance capitalism. Systemically, that's the problem. How do we go beyond it? Well, we need to understand a few core concepts. We talk about data. Every one of us talks about data like it's a thing that we all know about, right? But what is data? First of all, let's make a distinction between data, which is just information, right? Information about. Information about what? Let's make a distinction between information about rocks and information about people. Because we use this generic term data. What can we do with data? What should we do with data? And then we regulate, we create legislations. Oh, we can do this. This is allowable. This is not permissible. Are we talking about people? Are we talking about rocks? It's very important to make this distinction. Because there are certain things that I can do to people that I cannot do to rocks. I cannot deprive a rock of its freedom or its life. I cannot emotionally or physically hurt a rock. I can do all of these things to people. So it's pretty clear that people deserve greater protections than rocks. And unless we make this distinction, if we're just using this generic term and then legislating upon it, then we have some problems going forward. Someone's going to get the short end of the stick, and it's not going to be the rock. So let's say we're talking about the thing that's very important for us, right? Data about rocks, it should belong to everyone. It should be in the commons. Data about the world should belong to us all in the commons. Data about people, however, should belong to us. And here's why. Let's say I have a statue, right? Let's simplify it. Let's say I have a little tiny statuette. If I have enough data about this statuette, I can take a 3D printer and I can create an exact replica of it. So imagine what I can do if I have enough data about you. And I'll give you a hint, I don't want to 3D print you. But I want to simulate you. And I want to own that simulation. I want to create a copy of you, and I want to own that digital copy. Now, if that copy I have of you is a good copy, that's great, because it's a great proxy for me to understand and manipulate your behavior for whatever my motives are. If it's a bad copy, that's still not great for you, because I might think you're a terrorist when you're not a terrorist. And all of this really comes down to the notion of personhood. What does it mean to be a person in the digital age? This is you, and this is how we normally draw the boundaries of the self, at our biological boundaries. And over the years and over many trials, we have built a system of laws and justice that knows how to protect that integrity of that self. We call it human rights. Now, what happens, however, when technology comes into the picture? And I have an idea. and I don't want to store that idea in my head, but I want to maybe keep it on my phone. Do I have a conversation with my phone? Do I say, hey phone, put this idea, write it down in your notes app? And the phone says, yes, Aral, I'd love to do that. What is surveillance in this case? It's what surveillance has always been. Signals capture between two actors having a conversation. This is what the Stasi used to do. It's traditional surveillance. But what if our relationship to technology is actually fundamentally different to this master-butler relationship? What if when I have an idea in my head and I don't want to store it in my biological brain, but I want to store it on this phone, I extend my mind and thereby extend myself using this technology? If this is our relationship to technology, then it would make perfect sense to extend our understanding of the boundaries of the self to include the technologies by which we extend ourselves. In which case, surveillance becomes something completely different. It becomes an abuse of the self. And we already have a system of laws and justice that knows how to deal with abuses of the self. We don't need a whole new set of digital rights or data rights, I've heard them called. Data doesn't have rights. Human beings have rights. We need to apply the human rights that we already have to the digital age. And for that, we need to understand the essence of our relationship with technology, because this is a constitutional change that needs to occur. At its basics, what I'm saying is that we're cyborgs. That our relationship to technology is not master-butler. It is the relationship of a cyborg to its organs. Now, when I say cyborg, I don't mean we implant ourselves with technologies. Most of our technologies, nearly all of our technologies, are explants, external organs today, but no less a part of the boundaries of the self. And if we want to protect personhood, the integrity of the self in the digital age, then we need to apply these rights that we have to this new understanding of the boundaries of the self, the cyborg self. We need to take the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and extend it to include cyborgs, the cyborg nature of human beings. I don't say this to be prescriptive, by the way. I'm not saying you have to be a cyborg. I'm not saying you have to use modern technology. Quite the opposite. We have to really protect the rights of people who don't want to use technologies, because we're seeing it forced on people ever more often. We're seeing it forced in workplaces where you have to wear fitness trackers to get your insurance. This is a terrible precedent, right? I'm being descriptive. I'm saying that if you use modern technology, then your relationship to that technology is that of a cyborg to its organs. We're drafting exactly that right now at cyborgrights.eu. If you want to be involved, please just go on to the website there. If we want to fix some of these things, though, we have to start thinking about what kind of technologies we want. If the mainstream right now is unethical, then what are ethical technologies? What are ethically designed technologies? What do those look like? Ethical design is very simple. It relies on respect at its very core for three related things: respect for human rights at the core, respect for human effort, and respect for human experience. So if you respect human rights, the kind of technologies that you create will essentially be decentralized, zero knowledge, not trying to find out about you, right? Free and open so that anyone can change and update and grow with these, so you can't lock them in. Interoperable so anyone can host them and they can work together, there's no lock-in. Accessible, sustainable, secure. But we go beyond that. We care about making things that are convenient and easy to use and functional so that people will actually use them. And we go beyond that, and we create things that are amusing and delightful and beautiful. And that's as important, because the human experience is something that we have to respect. We add all these things together, and we have ethical design. And the problem with the mainstream today, the problem with the Silicon Valley model of technology, is that the core is rotten. At the core, our technologies, our business models abuse human rights. They're based on the abuse of human rights. But we care about human effort, and we care about human experience. Why? Because if we presented the core plainly, no one would eat that because it smells horrible and it looks horrible. So if the core of what you're building doesn't respect human rights, people are going to reject that if they can see it. So what do? You make sure the flesh is tasty and beautiful. You put a lot of effort into that, and then you make sure that the skin is just shiny and gorgeous, right? In Snow White, she wasn't presented with the poison, she was presented with the apple. That's what you do. And at that point, you're not practicing design anymore. In mainstream technology, we rarely practice design. We practice decoration. The art of taking something which, if presented plainly, would be unpalatable, and decorating it to make sure that it's not rejected by the person that you want to consume it. So that really is ethical design. It's not hugely different to how we do things today. The only difference is, in addition to respecting human effort and human experience, at the very core, we also respect human rights. So in a way, not so different, in a way, fundamentally, absolutely different. But what can you do today? Right? So how can you support more ethical technologies going forward? At the very basics, you can even do this within basic consumerism today, right? Not my area of expertise, really, but at least learn to differentiate companies that sell products from companies that sell people, right? Apple, when they sell you one of these shiny devices for a lot of money, the moment you buy one, Tim Cook smiles, right? Tim Cook's like, hey, another one. He's happy because he's made his profit. Now, if you keep using it and you buy things from iTunes, etc., then he's happier. But it's based on selling you things, right? Not you being the thing that is sold. When you buy an Android phone, Google is not happy at that point. If you throw that phone out the window, Google hates you. It's only when you start using the phone does Google start making money, right? So basic economics in terms of their business model did at least learn to identify the difference. It's not about which one is shinier, which one has different like rounded corners, or which emojis are moving their mouths or which ones are not. It's not about that. There are more fundamental concerns. Of course, if you want to make the next step, look at alternatives that are already being built by people like Purism, for example, who are building integrated products that are all free and open. The hardware is open, the software is open, all of it. And they're really trying to make an effort to hit those other two ethical design layers of convenience and experience. Are they there yet? Are you going to have an Apple-level experience here? No. But they need your support if they're ever going to get there, and they at least are trying to get there. Identify, for example, centralized silos, which are these factory farms, which will always be factory farms, with free and open alternatives. So Twitter, Mastodon. Mastodon came out about 8-9 months ago, and it's probably the greatest success story we have yet for a federated, decentralized system. So Mastodon means that you can run your own Twitter, like I do. Not your own Twitter account, your own Twitter, right? So I run mine at mastodon.aral, right? And it's a Twitter for one. I'm the only one on that Twitter. But my Twitter can talk to other Twitters. So this Twitter might be a community over here that has 100 people. This one might be a very popular space that has thousands of people, fandom about something maybe. And the moment somebody follows me from there, and I post something, all of those people there see my post on the federated timeline, so that we're actually finding out about each other. We're connecting these communities. But where is the Twitter Inc. Incorporated? There is no Twitter Incorporated, because it's not the same. It's not the Silicon Valley model. There's no center, and that's very, very important. And I can do whatever I want with my Mastodon. I have an API, but it's an API I control, and I can do whatever I want. There are alternatives. People ask me like, oh, what's going to replace Facebook? The only thing that's ever going to replace Facebook wholesale is another Facebook. But we can replace Facebook with 1,000 different things, right? In the Chinese sense, death by 1,000 cuts. So you can replace the messaging right now with decentralized solutions like talks.chat. You can use Signal if you don't want a fully decentralized but still an independent solution. Laura and I, we have a not-for-profit called Indie, And we build a product that protects people on the web when they're browsing from being tracked by Google, Facebook, etc. We built this because the ones that exist, like AdBlock Plus and Ghostery, we found were actually advertising companies and working for the advertising industry. And we're like, who's protecting people from tracking? Oh, uBlock Origin, which is great, use it. But who's doing it in a simple, easy way on iOS and Mac? No one. Okay, great. Now I have to clean a sewer. That's great. But it's important. So protect yourselves and protect others. So this is technological regulation. We have legislative regulations that we have to enact. This is technological regulation. This is telling those people, I'm going to stop you from doing it. I'm going to stop you from tracking people because that's an abuse. And we have fires going right now. We have battles we need to fight. You know, this isn't just going to be getting together with these folks over champagne, right, and smiling at each other. We're not going to solve it this way. Strong end-to-end encryption, which is essential for the protection of personhood, is under threat. It's under threat by May, it's under threat by Macron, it's under threat by Merkel, it's under threat by all of the governments. They're all playing by the same playbook. Oh, but terrorists, right? You are at more risk of dying from falling out of bed than you are from a terrorist attack. But we're not talking about banning beds, right? The one thing that keeps us all secure on the internet, oh yeah, let's get rid of that. Let's not do that. Net neutrality. You're all familiar with this concept, right? Every piece of information on the web being allowed to have the same rights to reach you, the same speed if you think about it as a highway. This is under threat. Under threat by what? Things like zero rating, right? So Facebook is zero rated somewhere. It means you get it free with your mobile phone plan. Oh, how nice. What about everyone else? What about them? Oh yeah, screw them. You just want Facebook, right? And what about if we do this to a third world country? Facebook free basics. What if Facebook goes to a poor country like India and says, oh, you're so poor. Oh, you really should have the internet though. So here, have it for free. But it's not the internet. It's the Facebook net. It's Facebook plus a few sites, and we're watching everything you're doing. They actually did that in India. They tried. And the Indian people were like, no, go away. And actually, when they said no, go away, one of the board members, Mark Anderstein of Facebook, he actually tweeted saying, anti-colonialism has been so great for India in the past. Why don't you just, keep going? Anti-colonialism. That's how they see it. Because, of course, this is a colonial system. Institutional corruption, though, is the reason why we can't regulate these businesses, right? You look at the European Commission, for example. Look at the top lobbyers. Google, Microsoft, Telefonica, Deutsche Telekom, Orange. Look at the top people being lobbied. You've got Oettinger. You guys heard of him? Nice guy. Yeah, and a few others. So we're talking about the influence of corporate finance in public policy making. Google spends millions. Publishers spend millions to lobby, right? And what about NGOs? What about people who actually try to protect individuals? Do they have millions and hundreds of millions to spend? No, they don't. Whose voices are being heard and what's being legislated? Revolving doors are another huge issue. We can't regulate these things because the people who are supposed to be regulating, the people at the European Commission who should be actually protecting your rights, ideally in a fantastical world where things work, can in 2 years' time go and work at Google or Facebook, the same people who were supposed to be regulating Google and Facebook. Do you see a problem here? Public-private partnerships, multi-stakeholderism, co-regulation. Hey, Google, come to the table. Tell us, how would you like to be regulated? Oh, we have some ideas. Yeah, thank you for inviting us. And actually, we paid for the table, so it's cool. We can call it all of these things, or we can call all of this by what it is, institutional corruption. And unless we battle institutional corruption, you're going to keep seeing all the bullshit that you're seeing coming out of the European Commission. You're going to keep seeing the parliament maybe try feebly to resist. We don't have a real parliament. We have the only parliament in the world that can't legislate. I mean, remember how the European Union was formed. How many people know what the European Union was? It was a coal and steel cartel, right? And so if you're wondering why it's not more democratic, this is the metastasis of a coal and steel cartel that we're looking at right now. And what does that bring about? Oh, it brings about Mr. Oettinger and his proposals for copyright, right? which is actually bringing us to being basically a China on the European scale here in Europe, which is still going on with internet filtering, right? I mean, this is ridiculous. This ridiculous stuff only happens, though, because we have this huge influence of corporate finance and public policy making. No sane person would come up with this shit without that corporate influence. I was reading this article about the censorship filter, the flaws, and it's nice because it's even in comic form now for people to understand. But at the end it says, is technically unfeasible or infeasible, right? Which isn't technically true, and that's why it should scare you. But do you know who could do this? Do you know who could implement this? Who has the technology today to do it? Remember our friend Google? Because they've spent a lot of money to build that technology right now, right? Think about these things. And would Google love to have access to everything that's being uploaded to the internet today? Yeah, they're trying by other means, right? Was Google the largest lobbyer of Günther Oettinger? Yeah, interesting. I wonder where he got his filtering ideas from. So if we want to move beyond these, if we want to have a democracy in Europe, we need progressive policies. We need to do two things. We need to regulate the abuses of this toxic business model of the mainstream, and then we need to replace it with ethical, democratic, decentralized alternatives. Very, very simple. Regulate and replace. We do this, we start building a world where we encourage individual sovereignty. Each one of us has sovereignty on the internet, and a healthy commons. We started this process off with a progressive political movement called DiEM25 that was founded by Yanis Varoufakis, who is the ex-finance minister of Greece. I approached him about 7-8 months ago, and I said, look, love what you guys are doing, but if you guys are trying to fight neoliberalism, you can't really do it using their tools, right? It's like Audre Lorde, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. So you have nothing on technology. Let's add a technology pillar to your progressive agenda for Europe, which is exactly what we started, an Internet of People, progressive technology pillar. My little not-for-profit is raising its ambitions out of necessity. So Indy is going to become the IndyNet Institute in order to build and encourage this Internet of People. Now I want you to imagine for me a different future than the one that we find ourselves stuck in right now. Imagine a future where every one of you own and control your own place on the internet. And it's this place, not Facebook, Google, etc., that all of your smart things connect to. And this is not a place that has to be provided by a government, but it's interoperable. So any organization, and lots of organizations, can provide the hosting of this space, so you don't have to protect it, etc., as a service, and in an interoperable, free and open way. And a world where we see this as a human right. We see this as something that contributes to the commons, so we support it from the commons, from our taxes. But it's a free and open system. So anyone who wants to can then build and extend it, giving it back to the commons, of course, and sharing it back. But if they want to charge for hosting it, if they want to charge for the service, sure, go ahead. And this way we start building a healthy economy on an ethical core. So where do we start? Well, the task is to take the interwebs that exist today and kind of move towards this IndyNet. And number one, it requires your own domain. You need to have your own domain online. Now today, of course, the system is you need to buy a domain, wait 5 minutes to, a day maybe, and then have the technical knowledge to have a server set up. That's not going to happen, and it's not happening apart from enthusiasts, right? So that's not working. And the thing we have to compete with is this, because it takes 30 seconds to create an account on Facebook. And no decentralized solution is going to win on experience if we cannot bring down the time to 30 seconds. So how do we do this? Now also, by the way, that is a lie. Facebook does not connect you to each other. Facebook connects you to Facebook. It's false advertising. I don't know what the laws are about that in Europe, but maybe we should look into it. That is blatant false advertising. There are a couple of ways we can do this. One, there is an alternative to the domain name system called OpenNIC that is not a part of the capitalist system, you can actually register a domain name for free and keep registering it if you want to, just like Let's Encrypt for SSL certificates. But of course, no browser supports this. No operating system supports it. So one of our challenges would be to push this alternative into the mainstream. The other, I was in Ghent just last week, beautiful place, and I found out that they have the .ghent top-level domain, and that they want to build a city of people. And they're not buying into this smart city Silicon Valley bullshit. So I was like, hey guys, I have an idea. I was doing a keynote there, their opening, and I said, hey, I have an idea. How about we start this here and give every one of your citizens their own Ghent domain name if they want one, right? This is amazing because immediately we start creating public space online. Because public space online is not a place. It is the connections between individually sovereign nodes that people are in ownership and control of. Now, we sync this with all of their devices, and then we start connecting citizens to each other and to the city. So Ellen finds Ralph. They can connect because they know how to find each other. They always have a presence that's always on. All of their devices peer-to-peer connect to each other. When they're talking, it's entirely secure and private. And then we take this next step and we let them talk to the city as much as they want and with them in entire control of this system and securely. And so the best part of this story is I got off stage, the mayor was there, the head of strategy is there, so I went up to the head of strategy and I said, so what do you think? And he looked at me and he said, let's do it. So we're going to start. So we're starting this week to do preliminary research. We're starting this week to see what we can implement as the kind of minimum viable product for that, for this city. And we're starting to build the Internet of People. And if we succeed with this, then we can take the place that we are and kind of rewind ourselves back to that question of who owns and controls our data, our technology, and the insight, and we can answer, we do, as citizens, as individuals, as human beings, and yes, we do live in a democracy. And I feel that every one of you in this room has a crucial role to play, because I truly do see you as the librarians of the modern age. And that comes with a lot of responsibilities if you know about the history of libraries and what librarians have done to safeguard knowledge and safeguard access to knowledge. And I see your responsibility as nothing less. So I hope that we will have you as allies on this journey forward so that we can build a world where we don't have to deal with all of this bullshit, where we can actually use our technologies to their potential, to that potential that harkens back to those days when I was 7 years old and when my computer only existed to empower me, where our technologies today can do that on a global scale. With your help, I think we can. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Aral. Noch ein kleiner Nachtrag. Aral hat auch ein Tool entwickelt, das für mehr Privacy im Netz sorgt. Und es nennt sich Better und ist besonders für den Safari-Browser, also für die Mac-Familie und das Apple-Universum geeignet, um dort ein bisschen mehr Kontrolle über Daten zu erlangen.